The Undertaker. Man, myth, monster, accomplished professional wrestler, and comic book character. In 1999, Chaos Comics released a series based on the origins and upbringing of the Phenom. It showcased notable names and familiar faces who shared a screen with the Deadman at the time. Characters like Kane, Paul Bearer, Mankind, the Ministry of Darkness, and too much. The comic also introduced new characters like the Embalmer, Jezebel, amongst others. To say this Undertaker series is strange would be a complete understatement. It is beyond bizarre, and it's less about the Undertaker's wrestling career and more about the mystical background surrounding the character's backstory, sometimes serving as an explanation of all the otherworldly powers the Phenom has been shown to possess. While this series does touch upon things from the Undertaker's actual career, they're mostly making things up as they go along. And as a kid reading this, I thought I had access to undiscovered lore about the character. I would sit there and watch Raws just waiting for the day that the Embalmer showed up on my screen. I wish that was a joke. I was truly that dumb. Now, I initially planned on talking about these comics issue by issue, but upon reading them, I realized that there really isn't enough story in each individual issue to necessitate that type of video. These are books that are full of awesome imagery and awful story. I don't think I hate it in concept, but in execution, it's just filled with fluff and filler. The story is thinly spread over 10 issues, and a lot of the time it's just recycling the same information, with a binge reading of all of this making you want to take a chair shot. While I'm a fan of the art, that's not to say that it's always spot on. Characters like Undertaker and Kane were well translated, probably helped out by their larger-than-life real-life personas. Paul Bearer looks almost identical to his real-life self at the time, with more of an emphasis and an exaggeration on his weight. But then there are other characters that couldn't be identified by fans of the actual product. Like, for example, this is supposed to be Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler. How? Then there's just times where I can't even really make out what it is that's supposed to be happening. And there's plenty of other times when the paneling, or even the art itself, is questionable to say the very least. Oh, that's unfortunate. The story feels like it progresses at the pace of a snail, and new developments can often feel far and with few in between. A lot of the time, it's fight after fight, followed by the Undertaker monologuing to nobody in particular. And let's just say that he has less than Shakespearean dialogue to work with. But when the story gets going, it really goes there. Which isn't necessarily a compliment. There's some really twisted territories with bizarre elements that these arcs get into. The story is strange, and granted, so is the concept of an Undertaker comic at all. But even having said that, they're really pushing it. The Undertaker is not only a professional wrestler, but is in fact the chosen one in the Underworld's prophecy. It is he who has been chosen to rule over Hell's prison, Stygian. Looking to stop this from coming to fruition is the Embalmer, as well as his former father figure and mentor, Paul Bearer, who commands the Undertaker's half-brother / his own son, Kane. Each of these three men have one Book of the Dead, but they need the other two to gain control. War spews out between the three, taking place in both the depths of hell and inside WWF rings. The underlings of the Undertaker's enemies disguise themselves as jobbers, your typical generic wrestlers that would never make it to a dark match on Heat, let alone actual episodes of Monday Night Raw, with the audience and commentators not being able to see past their human disguise. Only those with ties to hell can see their true selves. Well, them and Mankind for some reason. Mankind, who conveys all this information to Mr. Sacco. After the Embalmer finds this out, he looks up his file that reads, multiple personalities, homicidal and violent tendencies, an incredible threshold for pain, and an extremely high but twisted IQ. Okay, couple questions here. One, how can an IQ be twisted? It's just a numerical representation of perceived intelligence. And two, a high IQ? Are we talking about the same guy here? Mankind was beloved because he was a lovable buffoon. He was betrayed by just about everyone who he teamed with and never saw it coming any of the time. I don't think this is an accurate representation. Anyway, these different colored demons attack the Deadman, looking to stop him either from coming in contact with their higher-ups, or gaining access to another Book of the Dead. These fights are fun to look at once, but they're repeated ad nauseum. And sometimes full issues of the series are just Undertaker beating up nameless demons. And this happens a lot. Much more interesting than the mission that these men are on is the history between the three. Centuries ago, the Undertaker possessed all three books. He ruled over Stygian, until a powerful druid and evil scientist from medieval Earth, then named Augustus the Dark One, breached a portal to hell and vowed to conquer the Undertaker's wastelands. He created an army of dark souls stuck in Stygian, who aided him against their ruler. The Dark One used a spell to reverse the portal and send Undertaker into an abyss, where he lay dormant for years. Taker managed to grab onto one of these books as he entered the portal, with another one being sucked in after him. Now, everything I've said up until this point in time has been odd, but here's where it gets real crazy. The Undertaker claims that the Dark One's army was sent to Earth to create chaos and spread madness, in the form of other historically horrific people, with these panels showcasing Charles Manson and Adolf Hitler amongst others. Hitler has canonically made his way into a WWE comic book. You sure you want to attribute their actions to a wrestling feud turned comic story? Taker would later somehow become reborn to a mortal family on Earth, one that gave him a warmth that he'd never felt prior or since. His love for his family burned, and maybe that's why he felt the need to further the flame, taking it upon himself to burn his family alive. Undertaker kinda describes this moment as being on autopilot, being in a haze when he set his childhood home ablaze, and being watched over by the embalmer, suggesting that this was all due to the Dark One's influence. Augustus would then take in the young Phenom, and make him a slave made to work the Wheel of Souls, until one day the Deadman would break free and begin to set up his Ministry of Darkness. Unbeknownst to him at the time, Paul Bearer, a man who worked with his parents in their funeral home, rescued his badly burnt baby brother, after he attempted to run inside the family home and save his parents. He'd essentially be raised by the Fat Man, which is what Paul Bearer happily refers to himself throughout these books. This led Kane to a lifetime of pure loyalty to Paul Bearer. Well, that is until he started working in cahoots with his sister. Oh yeah, that's right. Kane has a sister, Jezebel. I'm guessing because that's what JR often called women at the time. I did say that Kane has a sister rather than The Undertaker and Kane have a sister, because she's only related to Kane, even though the comics for some reason referred to her as Undertaker's stepsister, which I don't think that she is. She's the half-sister of his half-brother.
What's that make us?
Absolutely nothing!
They don't have any relation. Jezebel is the daughter of Paul Bearer and her unnamed mother, a consummation that the comics make crystal clear was not consensual. Oh great, so now we're just turning the dearly departed Paul Bearer into a... What a way to tarnish the image of a legend. Granted, he was alive when this book came out, but still it's in poor taste always. Especially when you're using the likeness of an actual person. Jezebel's out for revenge on her father for what he did to her mother. And mind you, before this issue, she's never met him. Yet she still refers to him lovingly as Daddy. She also mentions how much she hates The Undertaker as well. The books are filled with constant betrayals and swerves for the sake of swerves. Alliances are short-lived, bad blood just boils over, foes become friends, and friends become foes in the face of logic. You would think that Vince Russo was a writer on this series. It's really on brand for the booking at the time. Paul Bearer begins aligned with Kane, only to be betrayed by his son and the daughter that he never knew he had. So Bearer then teams with The Undertaker, giving him the second Book of the Dead, as the embalmer brainwashes Jezebel into being his bride, making her brother his own brainless brute. Though apparently that doesn't take. On the wedding night of Jezebel and the embalmer is betrayed multiple times. Once by the demons who served under him, as they attempt to take Jezebel for themselves. That's a real mild way of putting what they're attempting to do. And then later by his would-be wife, her brother, her brother's brother, and her father. I hope you followed all of that because I barely did. There's some confusing story beats here. Like the Ministry of Darkness is mentioned in passing for the first 7 issues, and then when they finally show up, it's for 2 pages. This Ministry of Darkness consisting of the likes of the Acolytes, Farouk and Bradshaw, Viscera, Midian. And the Big Boss Man? The Big Boss Man wasn't in the Ministry of Darkness. He was in the corporate ministry, but that's not what this is. This is the original ministry. So what is he doing here? None of the rest of the corporation is here either. There's no Triple H, there's no Shane, there's no Mean Street Posse. So what is this guy doing here? He is so incredibly out of place. Their appearance is brief, and in the end it means very little. Mankind, who makes several appearances throughout the books, has nothing to do within them. He sees the demons, he fights the demons, but you could take his parts out of the story completely and nothing is changed. He literally has no interaction with his longtime rival whatsoever, in spite of the covers saying otherwise. It feels appropriate that he play a part in the Phenom story, but he doesn't actually have a part to play in it. He's just a walk-on cameo. The story doesn't feel particularly well planned out. Sometimes things just happen to happen. Characters just show up with very little rhyme or reason. Previously unseen characters are just brought in whether or not there's a plot or a place for them. A lot of the story beats feel needlessly recycled and written off as some dark magic MacGuffin. If I were to say that some previously unknown, unseen magical entity appears, and using their mystical powers, they teleport the Undertaker, Pallbearer, and the Embalmer to some sort of battlefield, I would accurately be describing several different issues. There's plenty of characters who appear in these issues that I haven't mentioned, and that's because they're all completely inconsequential. Cassandra, the Chronicler of Hell, Luton, the Undertaker's werewolf servant, Mesmore, it's just Mesmore. None of them mean anything. There's some fun fan service if you're a 90s mark, constant mentions and name drops of WWF talent, and even some implications toward WCW wrestlers at the time. The Undertaker's casual wear is basically the American Badass gimmick before there was an American Badass gimmick. It's just straight up biker taker. Clearly they were trying to take a page out of Mark Calloway's book. For me, this is very A Tale of Two Cities. I love the idea of an Undertaker comic. He's a character who has an interesting backstory that would lend well to panels. I don't even hate the plot of these books specifically. Conceptually, it seems kinda cool. But in execution, it feels really sloppy. It's like they had a blueprint for a story in which they had a vague beginning and end, but never bothered fleshing either out and just threw a lot in the middle. It's a really unfocused mess that doesn't know what to do with the characters it's been given, or even the characters that it creates. There was something there, but this just wasn't it. I think it has a unique presence with an interesting visual representation, but it's completely without substance and chock full of absurdity. Now, having said all of that, there's actually one more Undertaker comic that would follow this series, but it's a one-off special that feels mostly disjointed and disassociated from the rest of these issues. So if you like this video and would maybe like to see me tackle the last Undertaker comic, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
Hey, you ain't no Undertaker.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bad time. Same bad channel.